Hey YouTube, it's EvanMagician34, and I'm coming to you with the top 5 or so cards of Pharaonic Guardian. There are really a lot of honorable mentions from this set, actually, and most of them I'm not even going to bother to do in any kind of order, really, because they're all just fantastic in their own ways. Reasoning, in many cases, is just a free monster. It's very difficult for your opponent to predict in a lot of decks. It does burn off your spells and traps, but combo decks are the main way people took advantage of this. It was just a really cool way to get out something really big, like, say, Democ was one of the ways you used it. Metamorphosis, it's just straight-up improvement. Usually you can get something out like, say, Malicious, or your Magician of Faith that you flipped maybe even to retrieve this from your graveyard. And then you could just straight up improve it and turn it into something like Ru Senshi, or Thousand Eyes Restrict, or so on. A very versatile card, and yet, for the longest time, it didn't really feel broken. I mean, ultimately, in a lot of ways, I guess you could still debate whether or not it actually is broken or not. But at any rate, Metamorphosis. Book of Life, a truly amazing card. Not only is it a free special summon out of your grave with very little restriction, but it even removes from play a monster in your opponent's grave at the same time. A very beneficial effect, and one of the many things which helps keep zombies very powerful, even today. Lava Golem's another card worthy of mention, because he actually gets rid of virtually any 2 monsters on your opponent's field, and they can't do squat about it. If they want to negate the summon, they can negate the 3,000 point monster they're about to get, but they can't keep you from tributing off their monsters. He's an exceptionally good removal card, and he kind of goes in and out of being noticed or appreciated, and he's usually always kind of on the fringe, but that doesn't make him a bad card. He's still very powerful, and of course combining him with cards like Creature Swap just makes him that much better. The only honorable mention I really wanted to kind of keep to himself was Spirit Reaper. This guy's been on the list, off the list, you know, at 1, at 2, at 1, at 3. It really varies. But basically this guy's quite solid. He's zombie, which is a great type. He can hit your opponent for damage, if you hit directly, that is to say, and discard a card out of their hand at random, which is very good. And he doesn't die in battle. I mean, a lot of times he can just attack direct. They may attack a little bit over him, but they don't kill him, and you switch him to defense. Or you can hide behind him for a little while, and then when you clean their field, you can turn this guy back to attack mode. You can feed him to a tribute monster. There's a lot of stuff you can do with him. He's very versatile, and it doesn't hurt that he's dark also. Just so many good things about him. But on to the real top 5. Card number 5, Royal Tribute. Yes, it does need Necro Valley out to work, but that's pretty much the only drawback, and that's not much of one when you consider how searchable it is. You can discard Commandant or activate Terraforming to go get Necro Valley, plus Necro Valley's at 3. So it's very easy to get it. And activating this and forcing both players to pitch all monsters out of their hands is just an extraordinarily powerful move, especially since, like so many other cards that seem balanced because they do the same thing to each player, this card's a lot better because you're the one who controls when it activates. Controlling when and if it happens gives you very much the upper hand over your opponent, and ripping all the monsters out of their hand in a game that is so very monster-centered is a devastatingly well, it's a devastating play, assuming you can play it correctly. But that said, it really doesn't even take necessarily a whole lot of sense to be able to time Royal Tribute correctly. Usually it's just as soon as you can. So that just makes it that much better of a card. Ranking in at number 4 is Trap Dust Shoot. Though from format to format its power may fluctuate, it's always been a very solid play. It doesn't send the card that they lose to the grave, it sends it back to the deck, which is very good. And you also get to hand pick what monster they lose from their hand and put back in the deck, which just makes it that much better. The only drawback, of course, is that if they have less than 4 cards in their hand, then this won't work. But it's a great early game to mid-game card, and basically just completely getting rid of a monster of your choice is very powerful. It gives you a big qualitative advantage. Ranking in number 3, Book of Moon. The fact that this is a quick play very much has helped contribute to its overpoweredness. It's another card that's kind of gone back and forth on the list from time to time. Obviously in the days when flip effect monsters were very powerful, this card was that much better for the ability to repeat abuse things, but you can still use it on things like Morphing Jar even today. It helps shut off Synchro monsters, which is something it couldn't boast back in the old days, and it also shuts off Xyz monsters in the same way by preventing them from being summoned in the first place. And of course it can also block attacks and whatnot too. And I mean, if all else fails, you can use it in combo decks. So tons of good uses for that card, very powerful in many ways. It essentially kills things by setting them to the defense position which they usually don't want to be in. Ranking in number 2 is Mirage of Nightmare. Anytime a card says that you can just keep drawing cards, usually kind of something to look out for, hey, maybe this is a good card. Of course, it makes you randomly discard the same number of cards that you drew, and to make this seem a little more convoluted, you draw at your opponent's standby phase and discard during your own standby phase. But this allows you to stuff your graveyard full of cards, which is good. It allows you to rifle through your deck quickly, which is good. And you can shut off the random discard by destroying it or feeding it to, say, emergency provisions. There are lots of good ways to get around its drawback. And just think about this with cards like, say, Fableds or even Dark World monsters. I mean, there are plenty of good ways to use this card, and it's the open-endedness and the fact that it's a continuous card that just makes it so very devastating. However, I would argue that card number 1 from this set, in case you hadn't already guessed it somehow, would outrank even Mirage of Nightmare, Ring of Destruction. Having played in the days when Ring of Destruction was out there, I can definitely attest to how potent it is. It's cost-free removal. This one card just up and destroys your opponent's card and gets rid of it. That's already good. But factor in that it also deals damage straight up equal to their attack. That can be a lot of damage. Plus the fact that they just lost a monster, so they're liable for even more damage from your own plays and your own attacks coming on your turn, assuming it's not already your turn, makes this that much better. And, God forbid for your opponent, you're both at fairly low life points. If they threaten to beat you, you can always just flip your Ring of Destruction and force the game into a tie rather than take a loss, which is a lot better than the loss for you, needless to say, and it thwarts all your opponent's good efforts. In many ways, it was kind of a sacky card. It was also a cheap and cheesy way to win. The power of this is something you just have to think about. I mean, consider what kind of removal exists today, and what kind of timings does it have, and what secondary effects does it have. Now, think about Ring of Destruction in comparison. I think it starts to soak in. It's a card that's very unlikely to ever return to play, but hey, I mean, if it does someday, that'd be awesome. I'll definitely be running it in almost everything I build. So, until next time, that is the top 5 plus a few honorable mentions from Pharaonic Guardian. And rate, comment, subscribe, enjoy.